Are we live? I think we are. Just one thing I need to check first. Oh, yes, we are live. Are we live? Okay, so we are live. All right, so let's just go ahead and go right on into it. So today's date, April 20th, 2019. Yes, it is not lost on me that it is 420. So for all those who are enjoying the wonderful happy plant, smoke up for all of us that can't because the rest will still get drug tested, and we live in states that still make marijuana smoking and cannabis actually legal, unfortunately legal. So for everybody else, welcome to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that basically takes the week's events and trying to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and usually on How the Frack We Got Here is pretty much an adult podcast, so anything of an adult nature or language, which I probably will be using today, anything of that of a nature will be used, so viewer discretion is advised. So to go ahead and get right into it, because we all know what happened this week, but let's just go ahead and go to what, the Mueller report as far as that happens. And of course, Trump's favorite lapdog always had something to say. He actually had to have a speech before he let it go.
Investigation, thousands of subpoenas, hundreds of warrants, and witness interviews, the special counsel confirmed that the Russian government sponsored efforts to illegally interfere with the 2016 presidential election, but did not find that the Trump campaign or other Americans colluded in those efforts.
We also know that, obviously, from the various examples shown in this report, that there were different ways in which the Trump campaign knew about what the Russians were doing and really believed that they were going to benefit from what the Russians were doing to try to interfere with the election. I'll read you a part of that also in the report. It says, quote, although the investigation established that the Russian government perceived that it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected that it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in the election interference activities.
The Deputy Attorney General and I concluded that the evidence developed by the special counsel is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense.
The special counsel team said, quote, the evidence we obtained about the president's actions and intent presents difficult issues that prevent us from conclusively determining that no criminal conduct occurred. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him.
The picture that emerges here is really one of the president's aides and advisors and officials trying to protect him from his worst instincts. And this is what the special counsel says on this issue. The president's efforts to influence the investigation were mostly unsuccessful, but that is largely because the persons who surrounded the president declined to carry out orders or accede to his request.
Special Counsel Mueller did not indicate that his purpose was to leave the decision to Congress. I hope that was not his view, since we don't convene grand juries and conduct criminal investigations for that purpose. I didn't talk to him directly about the fact that we were making the decision, but I am told that his reaction to that was that it was my prerogative as Attorney General to make that decision.
There's a sentence here. The conclusion that Congress may apply the obstruction law to the president's corrupt exercise of the powers of office accords with our constitutional system of checks and balances and the principle that no person is above the law. That is, I don't think any other way to read that is saying, I, Robert Mueller, cannot enforce the obstruction of justice laws against the president because I am not empowered to do so under Department of Justice policy. But this is an invitation to Congress to say you can do it using the impeachment power.
The White House fully cooperated with the special counsel's investigation, providing unfettered access to campaign and White House documents, directing senior aides to testify freely, and asserting no privilege claims.
In this report, the special counsel said it found Trump's written answers to the team, quote, inadequate. And here's what it goes on to say. It says the special counsel agreed to receive written responses from Trump, but it, quote, viewed the written answers to be inadequate. We noted, among other things, that the president stated on more than 30 occasions that he, quote, does not recall or quote, remember or have an independent recollection of information called for by the questions. Other answers were incomplete or imprecise.
So I know a lot just got thrown at you. It really did, and I apologize. So let me go ahead and just summarize the last 4 minutes of what you just saw. Pretty much, William Barr, the Trump-appointed AG, who was railroaded through Congress because the previous AG, Matthew Whitaker, who was supposed to be Jeff Sessions' replacement, both of them actually stepped down because both of them were against the Mueller investigation. Now, do not get me wrong about the Mueller investigation. Honestly, the report that we got, which is actually public, out to the world right now, is actually the redacted version, which means that William Barr and his group went through it for terms of national security or whatever bullshit excuse they want to use. Basically, goes back and whitewashed the entire report. So we're really not getting the Mueller report. We're getting the William Barr's report, in which the first time I watched this, I'm like, you're supposed to be the U.S. Attorney General. Why in the world does it sound like you're basically batting for the president? I mean, you're batting for Agent Orange at this rate. It's obvious, you can tell. But it also says that it's kind of funny. The report that he puts out is in drastic contrast to what he's actually saying. We all knew the Trump presidency wasn't cooperative because he himself wouldn't sit down with Mueller. I wonder why. Almost the same sense like Kavanaugh wouldn't sit down with the FBI. I wonder why. Because, it's easy to sit there and say that they can find smoke. And for all those who haven't read the report, I'm still currently reading it. It's about 412 pages, and I'm around 312. After reading it, I'm sorry. Even as it stands with the redacted Barr version, there is still so much smoke around this Trump administration that Congress will really need to, they will have no choice but to act. I mean, like I said, you can go on to justice.gov, you can go to CNN. I think almost every website has the actual Mueller redacted report that you can read. And I recommend that anybody reads it. Now, you're not going to read it in one setting. Trust me, I tried to read it in the last 3 days, and I barely got to page 312 because I was steady more making notes in it like, how in the world are we still not talking obstruction of justice? Because it's funny that a lot of people have already went ahead and looked into it, a lot of fast readers than I am, and this is what they came up with, which I thought was really interesting.
Is daunting and the length dizzying. But after you've read
through the Mueller report, some damning stats jump off the page. This is the Mueller report by the numbers. First, more than 30. That's the number of times President Trump used phrases like, I don't recall, or I don't remember, or I have no recollection in his official responses to the special counsel's questions in the Russia probe. Next, 36. That's how many pages all of the Mueller report redactions would fill, or from some 8% of the 448-page report. Next, at least 5. That's the number of times the report says President Trump asked senior aides to lie, either for him or for the administration. Also 5. That's the number of hours it took Russian hackers to target Hillary Clinton after they heard Trump say this during the campaign.
Russia, if you're listening.
203. That's how many times the report mentions CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and NBC. The implication? Robert Mueller was leaning pretty hard on what Trump likes to call the fake news media for his definitive report. 11. That's the number of instances of possible obstruction of justice allegedly perpetrated by Trump and his associates as examined by Mueller. Those include everything from President Trump attempting to have special counsel Robert Mueller removed to pushing White House counsel Don McGahn to deny that Trump attempted to have Robert Mueller removed. Speaking of McGahn, the next number is 1. And that's the number of things that saved Trump from an obstruction rap, namely the fact that some higher-minded associates refused to carry out his orders. McGahn, quote, refused to recede from his recollections. That's fancy legal speak for wouldn't lie. Comey didn't kill the Flynn investigation because Trump's request that he, quote, let it go. And neither former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski nor White House official Rick Dearborn would pass along Trump's message to then Attorney General Jeff Sessions that he should essentially kill the Russia investigation. Now, staying with obstruction, 9. That's the number of pages Mueller spent telling Congress exactly how it could bring an obstruction of justice charge against the president, even though he determined that he himself was unable to. Despite this, the last number out is 0. That's the amount of specific evidence Mueller found that could clear Trump of an obstruction charge. And that's your reality check.
And And I love the fact that people were able to go ahead and actually look into this, and it's honestly amazing. Like, you heard it right there. 11 times that Mueller has found where Congress could actually build a case of obstruction of justice for impeachment against Trump. Now, for clarification on this, because everybody thinks that Mueller was supposed to get Trump. Mueller's job was to investigate whether or not the Russians interfered in the last year's election. That was the whole thing. That was his scope. So everything that was entangled in that was the reason why he was able to go after and indict. And of course, these people were tried in court and found guilty or cut plea deals. You know, the list is long. But at this point, we need to realize that it's not Mueller's job at this point to indict Trump. The report itself, like I said, interesting read if you ever have the time. It's interesting to where now obstruction of justice it's being mentioned so many times now, and of course the Mueller report, which actually shows multiple instances of obstruction of justice, it's now on Congress to act, which is why Elizabeth Warren had said that she wants to start. She's actually one of the very few 2020 candidates that sat there and said that we need to use the Mueller report to basically start impeachment proceedings for Trump. Now, for all those that don't know how impeachment goes, so impeachment is basically, of course, with the House and the Senate. You need 2/3 of the House, you need 2/3 of the Senate to basically move forward with impeachment, to use, as they call Amendment 25. So, it's, in the House of Representatives, it's easy because that House can launch investigations left and right. That's exactly what the Democrats got as far as the majority goes. The problem is going to be the Senate. The Senate, unfortunately, is still Republican controlled, and Turtle Mitch McConnell is still in the driver's seat. And as long as, because he's the majority leader, he can still block anything that comes up to a vote. Now, does that suck? Yes. But at some point, even Turtle McConnell can't avoid the fact that there's enough smoke on this report to where it questions Trump. It questions his administration, because at this point, almost nearly 2/3 of his administration is gone, either by jail, resigning, or firing himself. I mean, it's like watching The Apprentice, except this time he's only got, maybe 3 people left? And, I'm still waiting for Sarah Sanders to finally drop out, because let's be honest, after this press release job, nobody's going to hire her. Maybe Fox and Friends. But moving on from that, because like I said, that's still an ongoing thing. I hope that once when I finish reading the report and bring back all my notes, and I can point out specifically where I saw obstruction of justice, I can go from there on a different podcast. But moving right along, there is some actually good news, and I want to say about damn time, because here's the thing, I'm going to compare 2 stories. But for all those that don't know about Flint, Michigan, this is actually very good news.
I don't care how strong you are. And seeing your children poison, it'll break you sooner or later.
Now, for the simple fact of the matter is, yes, that's great news. It's been long. I mean, Flint, Michigan, honestly, one of the places with the worst water. I mean, how in the world can you be in a first world country and yet you have third world water system problems? It mystifies me. And the fact that it took 5 years to get the rest of the funding to fix the pipes, that alone is crazy. But here's another thing I want to point out, because that's the U.S., right? So Apparently everybody knows about Notre Dame, and if you don't know about Notre Dame, well, here you go.
To Paris now with Notre
Dame off limits in the wake of the devastating fire. The Good Friday ritual of the Stations of the Cross took place in the street with the twin towers of the cathedral in the background. And tonight, new information on the role a computer glitch may have played in that fire. ABC's Jane Longman is there.
A solemn procession in Paris today marking Good Friday. Thousands gathering to retrace the steps of Jesus, all in the shadow of Notre Dame, where Easter masses are cancelled for the first time in 9 centuries. Investigators now suspect the fire that ripped through this church may have been sparked by an electrical short circuit, a computer glitch reportedly showing the fire in the wrong location. But tonight, signs of progress. Crews have finally stabilized the church and firefighters are now pulling out. Officials today also revealing the artwork recovered from the cathedral escaped major damage. The rector of Notre Dame calling its survival a miracle. And today on the streets of Paris, we found that same hope among the faithful.
In a few years, Notre Dame will be built again. Notre Dame is the heart of humanity.
A powerful moment today, Tom. The crown of thorns relic saved from Notre Dame was today presented to worshippers at a Good Friday ceremony.
So here's the thing that bothers me is just that, I guess in my case, I'm all for historical context and landmarks, things of that nature. Notre Dame, Notre Dame in Paris burning, not really making me cry tears, but I guess people feel a historical context to it. Some people maybe feel even a Catholic connection to it or just a religious aspect to it. Whatever it may be. But the one thing about the story which I didn't catch was that donations have poured in. There's literally over $1 billion in donations to rebuild the church. So I'm not saying that it's amazing to me that how quickly that we will, it's amazing how quickly we will help religion, but we won't help humanity. Now, I'm not saying that all the millionaires in the U.S. could have helped, which they could have, because, if it takes $77 million to fix pipes, then you think how many millionaires are in the U.S. and you're telling me each of them can't donate 1 million, or billionaires. And like I said, it's an interesting parallel. I'll put it that way. It's an interesting parallel because it's a building. To me, it's a building. I'm like, it's a historical building, yes, but it can be rebuilt. But the whole outpouring in money, how quickly it was assessed and donated, that to me is how can I put this in so many words? It's unusual how quickly we'll build the buildings before we build back people. But hey, at least you still got your church. It's not like 400, literally over 200,000 children are still going to be suffering the effects of lead. But you got your church. But moving right along, another thing which bothered me was this guy. For all those that don't know about the barber who cuts hair for the homeless, he was actually shut down by police in Philadelphia. And the reason why is because he still hasn't got a reason. Actually, the funny part is, this is actually the video here.
It's a man giving out free haircuts to the homeless, and they out here harassing them.
That's why it's different. If it's Dr. Jimmy over here, he'd be cool. So listen to me, you got a call from the cop. He called somebody else to get the information with the cop to give to me. Why did he call the captain back? The captain called him. I'm trying to tell you, listen, got protection. Write it down. I work, bro. You ain't getting that on me. You got another opportunity. I bet, listen, man.
Okay, so I apologize, a little hard to hear what's going on. So pretty much, to make a long story short, the officer was told by his supervisor that to tell him to shut down and did not give him a reason. Keep in mind, the barber was literally outside cutting people's hair for free. He's already actually been acknowledged by the mayor of Philadelphia and other actual charitable foundations for his work, and yet he is told by an officer that he needs to stop. And I'm like, the one thing that always bothers me so is in situations like this, what is he actually doing that's going to harm people? Because it's not like he's going to litter. I'm assuming he's going to sweep up the hair that he cuts off these individuals and properly dispose of it. So there's no harm to the environment there. He's not asking for money, so therefore no licenses involved and no taxes are involved. He's donating his time, which, a lot of people, it just amazes me so that he's a good guy trying to do good things, and yet he is being told that he can't do it. So it just the real weak, because I looked into the story, the real weak excuse is that businesses that where he cuts complained about loose hair near their properties. So you're gonna sit there and tell me that they complain about loose hair near their properties. Do they know where the loose hair is coming from, or is just an officer who's honestly just wanting to just get a regular person, just needs a reason? And so that's the thing that kills me, where it's sad that if a person just simply wants to do good for people, let them do good. I see if a person wants to cut hair, cook meals, give clothing, give free education, anything of the above to help the community should never actually be knocked down. In fact, it should be encouraged. So to say the police are going to come up and say that he's annoying or he needs to stop because he's a nuisance or that loose hair is everywhere, that makes no sense. I can understand panhandling. Panhandling I can understand because that can be annoying and harassing. But when a person's just simply trying to do good, I can't knock them for that. That's a humanitarian thing to do. They shouldn't be held back because of that. But like I said, it's a mess where it's just, this is the reason why certain things are just, people won't try anymore, because you have others out there that will see something like this and try to get it shut down, which is just honestly annoying. But speaking of other things that are annoying, Amazon and Walmart want to try something with people with food stamps. I'll let it play out.
To force hundreds of thousands of struggling Americans to work in order to get food stamps. The Agriculture Department unveiling a proposal that would expand work requirements in the food stamp program known as SNAP. It already requires non-disabled working-age adults without dependents to have jobs, but states can waive that requirement in areas where unemployment is at least 10%. The proposed new rule would make it harder for states to get those waivers. Congressional Democrats are slamming this plan, and they question whether the president can even legally do it.
Okay, so pretty much the story itself is just that it always comes to food stamps, which always amazes me. So, like, how in the blue hell can food stamps, where people whether there should be a work requirement? There's already a work requirement in there if able-bodied individuals. Here's the problem with that. You cannot sit there and say to people, okay, we're going to give you food stamps, you got to work, if there's no jobs out there. Like, they keep on saying that, Trump loves there and say that unemployment among blacks among the lowest, which he had nothing to do with, by the way, but he wants to tout that statistic. But unemployment doesn't reflect everyone. It reflects certain data. So if you're like me and I live in Nashville, I'm going to be honest, jobs that are actually sustaining for, surviving, those are the ones that are far and few between. The low-cut menial jobs, because the minimum wage hasn't came up to $15 across the board yet. Every other job is 8, 9, maybe 10, maybe 11, maybe 12, and then you have to get another job behind that. So you're, basically you're killing yourself 80 plus hours a week just to survive. And that's if you can get those jobs, because not a lot of people can. So it's amazing to me that they're now trying to push this forward to where it's like, well, we need to have something done for these other bodies. If you want to, here's my thing. If you honestly want to sit there and you want to make this work requirement stick, open up more jobs. I mean, are there not more jobs in the state that can be opened up to individuals? Or it's like, hey, if you can't find a job, go to the job placement center. We'll find something for you in the state. We can make sure you're on a steady paycheck. You can work for the state. There used to be programs like that a long time ago, but they actually stopped doing that because they realized they worked a little bit too well, and the family services were starting to lose funding, which I cannot make this up. Any family services, SNAP, food stamps, Section 8, all this, they literally have to have people on assistance in order to keep their funding. Because if they don't, they lose it. So the system is already rigged, if you really think about it. That they're expecting individuals to come and get on this stuff in order to keep their funding, because Lord knows if we actually educate and help these people and be off of it, that's why it's a rigged system. Hey BJ, what'd you say? Professor Hulk, really BJ? Oh hey Trace, this is why we keep getting this shit popping and be like, fuck a job. And that's the thing, it's just like you can't sit there, you can't sit there it's all one big cycle. You can't sit there and say, well, you gotta work, but we're not gonna put out jobs. Or, we'll have jobs, but these jobs aren't gonna pay enough, you gotta do more. Or, this job requires an education, so you gotta go to school, which means you gotta get student loans, which means you're gonna be in debt. But, you have to jump through all these hoops. At the end of it all, it's like a casino. The only people that win a casino are the house. There are no winners in a casino except the casino people. That's the way it goes in Las Vegas, and it's the way in real life. But so when I hear people say, well, we need to make these people work, and it's like, people always want to work, but they need the jobs that they can actually survive on. Like, if you told somebody that if you give them one job, this one job covers all their bills, of course they're going to work it. But if you give them a job and it's only because they have no choice they have to take it, then they have to go out and get more jobs. They have to go get an additional job just to cover the difference. And sometimes it doesn't cover the difference, which means they're going to be working more. So you're steady more trying to keep the left-hand hand, and you're trying to basically do a balancing act. And that is fucked up, but that's the cycle, and that needs to break. But some happy news, because I had to find this, and because 420, and like I said at the beginning of the show, it is 420. I am more than sure a lot of you guys are out there enjoying. And if you're enjoying, whether you smoke it, whether you eat it, or other alternatives, I'm sure you're having fun with it. Be safe about it, because I have nothing against it. I don't smoke marijuana. I don't eat cannabis. But I still say that there are so many applications toward, aside from medicinal use, because honestly, it should be regulated just like alcohol and cigarettes. It should be, because it's going to get to that point anyway. Actually, I think 9 states have already adopted legal marijuana. And Colorado is just a shining example of it, because in Denver, you can't say Crown doesn't have it in Denver because everybody's too high to do something. But anyway, the reason why I bring this up is because on the business side of things, pot looks like it's going to be the next gold rush.
Some of the major cannabis
companies, Canopy, Cronos, Aurora, these are stocks that are up around 50 to 70% so far this year. So that's brought to mind some memories of the dot-com bubble from 20 years ago, where you had a rush into a sector, a lot of companies vying for market share, but not profitable yet, not going to be making money anytime soon. So that's, creating some cause for concern.
You mentioned the volatility. If we look at the peak to trough of some of these names, it's just been eye-opening. I mean, it's a hair-raising experience for any investor, and you point to something critical here. Great as far as sales growth is concerned, nothing as far as profits we can see, at least in the short to near term. Does that matter for investors at this moment?
It doesn't appear to matter that much just yet. On days when the companies report their financial results, they seem to matter, and you do have some short-term, stock drops when they report the results. But I think by and large, investors are looking ahead. They realize that now that cannabis is legal in Canada, that has opened up a huge market. And then, of course, there are several states in America that have legalized either recreational use or medicinal use, or both. And that is another reason why the sales growth could be pretty dramatic. And you're seeing all these partnerships as well. Canopy Growth is now backed by Constellation Brands, the company that owns Corona. You have Altria, the maker of Marlboro, betting on Cronos. And a lot of the other companies are doing deals in Canada. Tilray has a deal with AB InBev, the Budweiser maker, to do non-alcoholic cannabis drinks in Canada, and they're waiting to see, whether or not that's something they can expand to the U.S. at some point.
You know, the numbers here in the United States for me are really important. 9 states plus Washington, D.C. have legalized recreational marijuana. 29 states have legalized medical weed. And the separation of these two issues, whether it's for recreational use or the healthcare, the potential healthcare benefits, I think is something that a lot of these companies point to and say, this is where the growth ultimately is going to come from.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you eventually have more of these cannabis companies looking to partner with Big Pharma as well. Tilray actually has a Big Pharma partnership already, but they're the only major one that has struck a deal,
So, long story short, because he kind of goes into technical stuff. So, long story short, start investing. I mean, that's what I'm going to start doing. Because the long story short of that is just that I've said it for many multiple times on multiple podcasts. There is nothing wrong with marijuana. I don't consider marijuana a drug. It is literally a plant. It's a plant that grows. So, if anything, it's a plant. So, and I've also sat there and said that marijuana has many applications. I mean, just from the aspect of this, instead of prescribing narcotics that are addictive and opioids that are addictive and cause death, and mind altering drugs for those that are manic depressive and have mood swings and bipolar. You can for those that have seizures and severe disorders and things of that nature, that literally cannabis can come in and help alleviate or manage the symptoms. Even for soldiers that come back from theaters of war, will prefer marijuana to help cope with with their PTSD or anything of that nature versus any drug that you can give them. And on top of that, the actual plant itself can be broken down from hemp, and hemp has many applications itself as far as clothing, rope, biofuel. It is literally a plant. It would be the next. It's almost like taking the peanut and running with it, because the peanut itself has multiple applications. So why not the marijuana plant? And because it's 420, you already know people are going to be lighting up anyway. So again, for all those that are wondering about investing, find pot in more ways than one. But that's what I would do, because that's what I'm looking into now. It's just that investing is it is going to be the next gold rush. Now, again, like they said, 9 states plus Washington, D.C. are the only ones that actually have legal marijuana, while 8 states have medical marijuana. It's only a matter of time before all 50 states become weed. And you know what? This is what I said with the war on drugs. You want to know how you beat the war on drugs? You legalize it. Because you can sit there, you can seize, you can arrest people, you can put people in jail. The best way to actually stop something like the war on drugs is to legalize what they're setting. Why? Because taxes beat everything. Taxes is like the undefeated champion of beating anything it comes across. Because cartels cannot fight taxes. And let's be honest, they also hate competition. But at the same time, when you can get it down the street versus going across the border, which one are you going to do? So, like I said, maybe one day it'll actually happen. So, another thing that I found interesting, and it's always Florida. And before I show the story, why is it always Florida in the news? Florida is like the state for the craziest shit. And this story is no different. This story out of Florida, and I can't believe I'm saying this, 2 middle school girls charged with plotting to kill 9 people. According to a teacher, she sat there and saw the 14-year-olds acting hysterically while looking at a folder and overheard them say they would be arrested if anyone found it. She heard one to tell police it was a prank. The teacher saw the folder and saw a mention of guns, and then what she told school official or a police officer. The folder included the plans for getting the guns, killing the victims, and disposing of the bodies. Only in Florida. Only in Florida. I'm like, 14-year-olds, 2 14-year-old girls are making plans about getting guns, killing their victims, and disposing of their bodies. Whose child is, you know what? I usually would sit there and say in this case, whose parents are these? But I'm fairly certain because, they're underage. They couldn't actually give out the identities of these kids. But let's be honest, they're probably white. Because 14-year-olds already plotting a Columbine-esque shooting. Don't get me wrong, school shootings are nothing to joke about, but it just seems out of Florida of all places. It is just crazy the individuals there, because you've heard stories out of Florida, and it's like we used to always talk about the myth of the Florida man, and it's and that's why I say it's interesting to where now it's just like you have 14-year-olds, kids who are going to do this, and that's nuts. And hopefully they'll get the help they need or be put somewhere where they can't do any harm, because damn, Florida, there's just no words about that one. But the next couple stories I got, because I talked about, student loans and being in debt and how the cycle's rigged. Well, a lot of millennials are trying to actually get around their student debt, and this is one way of how they're doing it. Now that alone should tell you something right off the bat, because I myself fall into that category of millennials, where, of course, if you've been in college, you got student debt, that'd be me, and it's almost to the point to where it's like the game, and I can go into debt itself. I mean, student loans is literally the greatest scam next to taxes, because you really think about it, our tuition in the U.S. goes up exponentially each year, which makes higher education harder to get for those that are wanting to actually go into it. But here's the kicker of all this. Not only do they sit there and say, well, we're going to make higher education harder, we're going to take away the other options. Trade schools. And I've said it best, and I'll say it again. There is nothing wrong with going to a trade school, because you know why? Trade schools have great careers. Electricians, plumbers, construction, contractors, I can keep going down the list. Auto mechanics, I can keep going. But there's nothing wrong with a trade. It used to be at one point where we used to be told to kids, like, hey, if you can't get in college, learn a trade, because that way you can always make sure you got guaranteed work somewhere. Because let's be honest, for a lot of the trade work that still goes on in the US, there's still guaranteed work for that. But of course now, with most schools and with Betsy Davos running the show, unfortunately, trade schools, as far as, workshops, metal shops, auto shops, wood shops being in schools, is being cut out during the funding. So now you're removing the idea of trade schools. On top of that, you're making scholarships even more scarce. You're raising tuition, but you're steady more pushing student loans. And that right there is the sole problem, because student loans come with such a high APR, because you basically, for a lot of people who get student loans, the way you get student loans is almost like getting set up with a car loan with a subprime car loan, which means that your APR is probably going to be anywhere between 19 to 24%. Even if you set it out for 60 months or 72 months, whatever you may have selected, it's going to rack up, because the interest alone off that is going to be more than what you took out to go to school with in the first place. So you can't really blame millennials or blame those that are having to take out their 401k, because let's be honest, debt is crushing. Debt is modern. If I could go so far as say this, debt is modern day slavery, because you know why? You're constantly thinking about it. You really can't get ahead. Forget vacation. Forget actually trying to get a house. And like the thing said, for a lot of people out there, that might prevent them from starting families, because you got debt. And it's always funny where I hear the old people talk about, well, you need to put back, you need to save what you can and work from there. Well, it's easy to say that, because in your time, college education was under $15,000. You could actually buy a 3-bedroom home for $5,000. Lord knows your car back then really wasn't above $3,000. You could afford it. Now look at it. What the modern day to a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home is over $200K. To get a 4-year education, you're probably gonna be spending about over $70,000. To even get a car, even at the lowest point, you're still paying over $22,000. Off what? Off jobs that pay less than 14 an hour, because all the other jobs require some sort of experience, or you know somebody. So of course the game is rigged, and I can't blame individuals that have to do that just to get ahead, or just to break even. And is it messed up? Absolutely. But until we can actually get Congress to accept this, and I just said best, if I could go back in time before I applied to go to college, and I was like, if I thought about it, I probably would have went to a trade school first. I really would have. And not to say that, of course, if I didn't, I would never met all the friends I have now, and the lifelong people in my life, and that's well and good. But if I could go back in time to my 18-year-old self, who was filling out college applications, I probably would have sat there and said no to student loans. And I'll be honest, I said when my niece and nephews become college eligible, I'm going to make sure they never hear of student loans. Because the debt system is way too easy to get into, and it can be difficult to get out of, because it preys on those who don't have the means or don't have certain savings. Like we do the Watch Your Pockets challenge every week. That's what we're trying to do, is trying to change your financial future. But again, kind of hard to do so when the debt system is pretty much holding on the cards, just like the casino is. But moving right along to my next to last story, and I just talked about debt, and we all have, look, let's be honest, we've all talked to debt collectors. We all hate when they call us, because they'll call us at all times of the night. I sometimes get those calls. I actually entertain those calls, because, hell, if you're going to call me at 1:30 in the morning, I'm going to talk to you. And it's going to be funny. It's like, and they always get, you're going to pay today, aren't you? No. Well, let's go on your credit report. Okay. Which is always funny, where I understand from a debt collector side, you're trying to make commission by forcing, which is always interesting. Debt collectors will pay people to literally be bullies on the phone to get commission for those that are paying back their debts. And I've always said it best, look, if I had it, I'd pay you back, but I ain't got it. So you can't, it's always funny when I actually try to go the route of, well, you can't ask somebody, you can't take out a loan. I was like, taking a loan is what got me in the situation in the first damn place. But again, it's interesting. And the reason why I bring that up is because, well, you know how debt collectors can, call you? Well, if they get their way, they can do this. Yep, folks, I can't make that up. As you sat there and saw that, yes, if that law is updated, debt collectors will be able to email and text you. And you thought them calling you at odd times of the night was bad? Now you'll be looking at that text, and I see a lot of people going, new phone, who this? I can see that actually happening. And I won't complain. I'll be laughing my head off, because, again, texting and emailing, I'm like, you can block emails. You can even block text messages. There's apps out there for that. But I just think that, amazingly enough, they're making it easy for debt collectors to find you, but not making it easier for you to get out from under them. But again, that's the game. But like I said, it hasn't been passed yet. It's still being discussed in Congress. So again, another reason why lobbying should be outlawed. But going back to my last story, which I call the good news segment, because in a world of doom and gloom, we need to have some good news, something positive to make us smile a little bit and go from there. And this story, because educators hold a near and dear place in my heart, because if it wasn't for teachers, you wouldn't have this guy in front of you right now. But I love the fact that when teachers teach without actually being a paycheck. And I'll explain by the story by playing this.
just motivates my life, really. I just feel like I'm giving them power to enjoy their life here in America.
My teacher is so amazing teacher, and she teaches us with the powerful energy.
One of my students texted last night, today I went to Target to go shopping for my children, and I went by myself. I was very happy, which also made me happy.
Now, stories like that I could always want because, like I said, educators. When I say there's teachers, they're educators, and those that are just passionate about their job. And honestly, she's very passionate about her job. To actually, after 30 years of a profession, to turn around and actually teach out of love for it. I mean, there's very few teachers out there that still do that. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of teachers out there who will go the extra mile for their students. I was lucky enough to have a lot of them in my life. I feel so bad for a lot of kids right now because a lot of kids aren't getting that same type of experience I had, because I had teachers who were on me about my grammar. I had teachers that were on me about my lack of words. I had teachers on me about my shyness, about me always, because I'll be honest with you, all this right here, this was all shy. I didn't say a word. If I read, I was silent as a mouse. I had teachers telling me to stand up, open your chest up, and speak, Miss Churchwell. But all those influences was great for me because, again, it helped me become who I am. So it's amazing that when I see teachers out there that are doing the same thing, that's why I'm like, of all things in education that's missing, that's one of them. But then again, teachers these days, educators, underworked, underpaid, overworked, usually in cramped situations, much like here in Nashville, because, that director, that piece of shit, Sean, whatever his last name is, who literally got paid to leave, left our education system in shambles. And I feel bad because the ones that actually get hurt the most are the kids and the teachers, because some teachers just want to be there to teach, and you can tell the way they have the impact on people, and that's the big thing. You're a great educator when your impact shows on your students. But again, I just thought it was a kick-ass story because, like I said, teachers will always have a near and dear place in my heart just for the impact they have on me. But that's the end of the show for this one, guys. So thank you all for watching, because like I said, it's 4:20. So if you're watching this because you're too high, I'm still going to say thank you anyway. But if you are going to be partaking, guys, be safe. Don't do anything reckless, especially if you're in those states that ain't legal. So again, be safe and enjoy, and happy celebrating. Hopefully Willie Nelson and Snoop Dogg left something nice under your tree. But aside from that, guys, a little shameless plugging before I go, because I'm not the only cat that does stuff here. You've probably seen Trace Brown, DJ King 80 Wayne, it's also in here. He actually has a couple of shows himself. He has The Bump Down, which is a musical podcast, which he goes over what's hot on the charts and what's not, what's on the mainstream and on the underground. It actually gives a very good idea of what the musical industry is. And also, if you want your music to be played by him on his show, then definitely reach out to him, DJ King 80 Wayne, for that on The Bump Down. He actually has a Smoke of Truth, as what I call it. The Smoke of Truth is the unedited, check your ego at the door, in your face, realest podcast out there, because he's gonna come with truth, but not everybody likes truth. But I still respect, because he's unorthodox but very intelligent brother that you definitely need to give a listen to. Aside from him, very soon, my other person who should be, making his way here somewhere eventually, Thomas, aka the Mountain Puncher, has a To Be Determined podcast. To Be Determined podcast is a fitness podcast, because anybody who's seen Thomas knows he's about fitness. So he's going to talk about, what works for him as far as certain workouts, certain things, nutrition, and just giving his personal testimony, because one of these days I am going to find that picture from him 10 years ago, and I'm going to put it out here because if I told you that person, that picture is that person now, you probably wouldn't believe me, but it's true. But he's actually going to be starting 3 p.m. on Saturdays as well, so he's not too far off. And also my other friend of mine, which they'll all be here, can't wait for that, Vaughn, Avon Westpoon on Facebook, has several podcasts of his own. He actually has the I Get That Reference BST podcast, which is a 30-minute podcast, which goes over music and videos, just assorted news that you might be informed of. Very interactive show. He actually has Rhythmness, where you can reminisce over the rhythm, where he actually goes over musical albums and grades them to a 4-tier rating system. Want to know what that is? You have to watch Rhythmness to find out. He also has Random as Fuck with Uncle VZ, which I might have missed that one earlier today because he usually does it on Saturdays, but we like to call Random as Fuck the pool of ratchetness that we sometimes dip our toes in, just to give us a break from reality and chuckle and stuff, because it is some very funny and sometimes messed up videos, also interactive. And of course, as far as me, of course, How the Frack We Got Here, usually every Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon. And of course, the Off Limits podcast, which will actually be later today, which I'm very excited about because later today it's between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. because we're going to have a full crew here. And we're actually going to have a call-in show. So that's going to be interesting as far as the topic and just seeing if people are going to call in and go from there. Really excited to try that out. But aside from that, all of our shows can be found in the YouTube group, I Get That Reference. Oh, excuse me. So if you ever want to join, it's free to all. The only thing we ask that you just basically be social. Like, share, just talk. That's all we ask you to do. And also, all of us do have YouTube pages. Excuse me. So if you look up the Bump Down, if you look up I Get That Reference, if you look up Off Limits Podcast, you look up How the Frack We Got Here, all of these are active live YouTube pages that you'll be able to like, share, and subscribe as we try to keep them updated. And like I said, I do have another podcast in the works that is going to be gaming and sports because I think that, sports needs to be talked about, and I can always talk about sports all day. And when it comes to video games and just PCs, I want to be able to talk about that too. So I still haven't gotten a title for it, but I will actually try it next week, and by next week I'll have a title for it and just go from there. But aside from that, guys, like I said, thank you for watching How the Frack We Got Here. And like I said, this is a show actually about staying informed. Staying informed means just to be able to not look at all things at face value, to really go beyond that, to do your research and find out your own truth. And once you bring that truth, you basically explain it to others and hoping that you'll instill them to do the same, because an informed community can make a whole lot better decisions than an uninformed one, because an uninformed one got us Trump. So like I said, guys, happy 420. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope to see you guys in the Off Limits podcast. Aside from that, guys, have a good one. Peace.